Good morning, USA and friends from around the globe. Today's talk is about the abuse of the shadow docket by the Supreme Court. In past podcasts, I've discussed the Supreme Court as the last bastion to protect democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law, as well as its civil war it has with the rest of the judiciary, who are in fact, in the main, doing exactly that, where, sadly, I have concluded that the fascist majority six have only proven their enthusiastic complicity in disemboweling our constitutional order while embracing tyranny, the tyranny of one-man rule, as we've learned from their demented grant of quote-unquote absolute immunity to Donald Trump. In its perfidy, the fascist majority have misused and abused what is commonly called its shadow docket, based on emergency applications by Trump, from which it has made a huge number of impactful decisions in favor of the Trump regime without the submission of proper writs of certiorari, legal briefs, and oral argument before the court, and, importantly, their opinions explaining and justifying their obvious politically inspired activist decisions. Predictably, as of September 2025, the Donald Trump administration or regime has largely succeeded in its emergency requests to the Supreme Court during his second term. A July 2025 NBC News tally of the first 8 months of his second administration found the administration had asked for emergency action an incredible 28 times and lost only 2 cases, with others still pending. Other estimates claim an 84% success rate with 18 out of 25 cases. The extraordinarily high success rate is due to the court's 6-3 conservative and quite fascistic majority, which includes 3 justices appointed by Donald Trump during his first presidential term. Now, what are the key outcomes for Trump's emergency requests? Well, in overall wins, the Trump administration has won the vast majority of its emergency requests on the Supreme Court's shadow docket, often overturning temporary blocks on his presumptively unconstitutional executive orders and policies imposed on him by lower courts. Immigration. The Supreme Court allowed the administration to move forward with plans to end temporary protected status, TPS, for hundreds of thousands of immigrants from countries including Venezuela. The court also greenlit the deportation of immigrants to third world countries, such as South Sudan, where they certainly have no ties and their lives would be endangered. Government personnel. The court has repeatedly issued temporary rulings allowing Trump to fire federal workers and independent agency officials while the legal challenges proceed. In September 2025, the court granted the administration an emergency request, to stay a lower court's order requiring the reinstatement of Federal Trade Commissioner, FTC. Passport gender markers. In September 25, the administration filed an emergency request to reinstate a policy that would limit gender markers on passports to a person's biological sex, appealing a lower court ruling that had blocked the policy. Its significant losses? Well, we're down to two, basically, that I see. While mostly successful, the administration has had a few notable setbacks on the emergency docket, both involving immigration cases. First, the court blocked plans to immediately deport immigrants under the Alien and Enemies Act of 1798. Big deal. Any moronic set of judges could have done the same. It was a stupid, invocation of the act. And two, the court ruled that the administration must seek the return of a migrant who was wrongly deported to El Salvador and certainly without due process. But again, they used the word facilitate the return. They slipped that in, and that is just a red herring. It confused and caused chaos in the lower courts. The shadow docket, aside from all of that, also raises concerns over transparency. So the large increase in the number of emergency requests filed by the Trump administration has led to a major increase in the use of the Supreme Court's shadow docket, while critics, including constitutional scholars like Jason Stanley, who I think has written on the subject, and even some of the justices, obviously the three, have raised concerns that this process lacks transparency and allows the fascist majority to fast-track politically charged policy and executive orders changes intended to expand presidential rights to a point of absolute dictatorship. This has led to a significant partisan divide in emergency rulings, with Trump's Nazi nominees frequently voting to grant his requests and the court's liberal justices often dissenting. That is what the data shows. That is what the facts are. The administration's real success rate on the emergency docket is either a minimum of 84% compared to 50% for its predecessor, Joe Biden, or it raises to the level of the astonishing reported 28 out of 30 cases by NBC News. And finally, it must be noted that these shadow docket victories for the Trump regime, overturning numerous lower court orders, maintain the status quo favoring the Trump administration, causing the irreparable harm legal concept to be basically bypassed, ignoring the 4-point balancing act it lays out, and more than that, signals the court's forthcoming pro-Trump decision on the litigation itself when it arrives at their doorstep. Having found unbelievably that more harm is done to the government than to the plaintiffs, who have had, in many cases, lost their liberty interests without the temporary injunctions remaining in force and pending conclusion of fact and law by the lower courts. Thanks, and please subscribe.